Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, now that it's been nearly a week and a half since the release of Season 7 for Diablo 4, especially with the progression speed being what it has been this season, I have done a lot of farming. And while doing a lot of farming is obviously a good way to make yourself stronger, it's a lot more important to farm correctly than it is to put in just raw time, as you can easily put in like a quarter of the time to become powerful that someone else does who just farms blindly without a thought for what may be the best option at any given time. So today we're going to essentially go over the quickest method of farming anything and everything that you will need to actively farm in Season 7, with a note that anything I don't mention here I have simply not personally felt the need to go out of my way to get more of in Season 7, as I've just had enough of it naturally from doing everything else that I will say on the list. That said, let's start off simply with experience. The best general method of gaining XP is Infernal Hordes, especially on Torment 4 due to the sheer density of elite monsters within this, especially if you go for things like Hellborn boons, which are already the most sought after boons anyways. However, if your build becomes strong enough that you are effortlessly walking through tier 100 pits or above that, so a tier 100 or above build, it becomes better to just do those back to back, essentially speed farming for paragon points if you can complete that level of pit in like 5 minutes or less. Next up then is gold, which is another simple one. There are three main methods for this. The most generally applicable is Whispers of the Dead caches, which are best farmed in the headhunt seasonal activity by just ramming through all of the high grim favor reward activities in each zone back to back. The second option is less of a farm so much as an overall mentality shift, which is that when running lair bosses, 9 times out of 10, I will sell any uniques that I get from them that I'm not going to be keeping instead of salvaging them. They aren't worth a crazy amount for each one to just sell them to a vendor, but it does add up over a full session of boss farming if you do that kind of thing. Otherwise, the third one that a lot of people may not want to hear but does need to be mentioned, which is trading. If you have good equipment that you don't plan on using, other players will happily pay gold for it. I've heard of certain legendary aspects like Fast Blood even, which is key to the Necromancer Bloodwave build, going for easily over 1 billion gold for just a decent roll. Not even a maximum roll either, so it definitely bears mentioning at the very least. Next up then, let's move over a bit to equipment. For Scattershot legendaries and just like a large amount of them, which is most important when just trying to fill out your Codex of Power to begin with to at least the max normal roll before worrying about Ancestrals, and the best method for this in Season 7 is to just do the headhunt seasonal takeover zones with a specific focus on interacting with the roots that will pop up after completing Grim Favors, and doing the cocoon events with the bosses whenever they happen too. And also looking for treasure goblins or silent chests across the zone as well, and this is more rewarding the higher difficulty tier that you are on as well. As for Ancestral Legendaries specifically, these are a bit rarer, but they also drop in decent rates from the cocoon events in the headhunt activity, and you can get guaranteed Ancestrals from either the Ancestral Whispers of the Dead caches, which can be offered as a reward at random, or the greater equipment chest that you can open for 200 Aether at the end of the Infernal Hordes activity, which is guaranteed to drop at least one ancestral item if you open it. As for unique items specifically, if you want a scattershot of them for whatever reason, just lots of uniques, then the Undercity Tribute of Ascendance isn't too bad at all. It is guaranteed to drop at least one ancestral item at the end of it too, with a reasonably high chance of dropping a mythic unique compared to pretty much every other activity in the game. So you should pretty much always do these if you do have the tributes available. That said, otherwise for uniques, you generally want to target farm more than spreadshot, because there are the lair bosses that exist in Torment difficulties with a specific loot table for each one. So you can very actively seek out specific targeted uniques and farm them in this way. This also applies to ancestral uniques. It's the best way of getting those because you generally will want a specific ancestral unique, not just the concept of an ancestral unique. For mythic uniques specifically then, aside from the Tribute of Ascendance, which was mentioned earlier and is fantastic for them, all lair bosses do have increased mythic unique drop chance compared to other sources, but Duriel and Andariel specifically have the highest chance of mythic uniques among the bosses, and the higher difficulty tier that you do one of these bosses on, the higher the chance of them dropping a mythic unique gets as well. Next up, I want to talk about the seasonal specific important farm items, which mostly are going to be Restless Rot, the seasonal currency. This is required for witch power unlocking and upgrading, and also for making occult gems, so you will want a very large amount of it over time. The best way to get it very specifically is the Cleansing Pyre events within Headhunt seasonal zones. This is the event where you interact with like a little pile of a totem or something, and then waves of enemies will start trying to spawn and kill the totem. As long as you keep the totem alive, which you do by killing the enemies will continue to spawn. And because these are all head-rotten enemies, and there are even elites that spawn among them quite frequently, they just drop a very large amount of Restless Rot, more so than any other source. So always do these if you pass them, and if your only goal at the immediate moment is Restless Rot, specifically go around headhunt zones looking for these, as these are what you really want to do. too. Then we should also talk about Fugitive Heads, the other specific material to getting occult gems. These drop from the boss of the same name, the Fugitive Head, which is a random spawn chance instead of the normal head-rotten bosses in both the open world cocoon events and headhunt zones and also in the rootholds, but only in torment difficulties, with increased chance of spawning for each higher difficulty tier. You can also double this chance for a Fugitive Head by using the Draught of Whispers elixir as well. The best farm for these is to have that elixir active, go to headhunt zones specifically looking to interact with the cocoon events, as this is the fastest way to spawn head-rotten bosses on repeat, and every head-rotten boss does have a chance of being a Fugitive Head. Outside of that, there is one more sort of seasonal specific item, which are the Forgotten Altars for the Lost Witch Powers. You only need to find 4 of these to get the main rewards for them, but some players are just not finding them at all, so to quickly go over it, the best and quickest way to specifically get Lost Altars to show up is to run as many dungeons as you can as quickly as possible. You also want the Draught of Whispers elixir active, as this increases the chance of them showing up, and the chance also goes up in higher difficulty tiers. But the main goal for this is to just find a short dungeon that you can plow through on repeat, the best one that I've heard of being Hoarfrost Demise in the Fractured Peaks. Walk through the whole place to see if an altar has spawned there, exit the dungeon, use the reset dungeon button in your quest journal, and then enter the dungeon again to repeat until the lost powers have actually been found. Then a sort of seasonal adjacent farm to this, which is gem fragments, as you need an absolutely crazy amount of gem fragments to make your full suite of occult gems to begin with, but you also need a crazy load of these to just have good gems in your sockets in general. These were super plentiful last season, but got their drop rates nerfed hard before Season 7, so now we are genuinely lacking them as a material. So it's worth knowing that the best way to farm gem fragments right now is actually in headhunts. You can still use the materials chest in Infernal Hordes if you want to, especially if you're someone who can consistently farm like 1,000 Aether or more, but if you are in a powerful enough build, just walk around headhunts killing stuff on Torment 4. The best way for gem fragments is actually to do exactly that. Do Grim Favors, do cocoon events when they spawn, do the cleansing pyres like you would for Restless Rot, and then also just look out for loot goblins, which do spawn pretty frequently in headhunts too. The simple reason for this is that all elites have a chance of dropping a pile of gem fragments when you kill them, and headhunts throw loads of elite monsters at you, at least if you're interacting with the actual activities. And so over time, this can be quite rewarding, especially if you add in that there is a Whispers of the Dead reward cache for specifically gem fragments, and of course you will get these from doing headhunt, though it's obviously a random chance whether you're offered that cache or not. Past that, we are moving into more general things once again. Obducite is the main bottleneck for masterworking this season, and the best way to farm it is with the Tribute of Refinement used in the Caressed Undercity activity. This gives you a nice big pile of Obducite extremely quickly if you have it. The main places that I've had these drop is in Nightmare Dungeons, and the best place to get Obducite if you don't have any of that Tribute is actually also Nightmare Dungeons as well in Season 7, specifically due to the Season Blessing that boosts the amount of Obducite that drops when Obducite does drop. This, for whatever reason, affects Nightmare Dungeon drops way more than it does Infernal Hordes in the Materials chest, which has just made Nightmare Dungeons much more effective at generating Obducite for the time spent doing them. As well, on that front, bartering caches in the Mercenary Den got a significant boost too, and so the Masterworking cache that you can get for bartering is also great for Obducite, as is the Boss Material Summoning cache for boss summoning materials. Then just a couple of final things. Runes are still super important to builds, of course, and are also important for letting you target craft specific mythic uniques, but drop way less this season. The best way to get runes, specifically especially legendary runes, which are the most sought after ones anyways, is simply to do high torment difficulty lair bosses. These are the best farmable activity for getting runes, and while it's slower than it was in Season 6, there's still no more consistent way to do it than this. Then finally, a note on Scrolls of Restoration. These are the items that you can use to reset the temper charges on an item if you run out. This lets you get another few chances at making it roll what you want to make the item actually good for you. These can be incredibly important to upgrading your build past a certain point of power, and while you won't have any of these unless you go out of your way to do the relevant activities, you do get them most consistently from the Greater Equipment chest at the end of the Infernal Hordes, the one that costs 200 Aether to open. On Torment 4 difficulty, you get 2 scrolls every time you open that chest, so the fastest way to get a pile of scrolls is just do a 6-wave Infernal Horde, hit 200 Aether, jam it into the equipment chest to get a couple of scrolls, and repeat this as many times as you feel you need to. That just about does it for today, everyone. The most efficient current methods of farming essentially everything relevant I can think of worth farming in Season 7. This list has everything I've ever felt the need to stop and farm during this season, but if there's anything that you think is worth shouting out that I maybe didn't include, of course feel free to leave it in the comments down below, as well as any methods you know to farm it. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.